The total intelligence method has 7 parts. The first part is understanding the unconscious mind, which is all of that trauma, the fear, the belief systems, the limiting belief systems that life has given us. Because by understanding those, we get to, in the moments of decision, do one of 2 things. Repeat the pattern, is we think we're doing something new, but it's actually just a nuance of the old, or exercise free will. And free will is where the 6 parts of the total intelligence come in, which is understanding how you think so you can think more effectively, understanding how you feel, understanding how you show up, understanding how you do, which is the body, understanding how you adapt and remain flexible so your behavior is always in a growth pattern, and understanding how you express, which is where the legacy comes from.
Welcome to the Inner Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Paul Ryan. Today's guest is Gaia Ferreira. With over 2 decades of experience, Gaia is recognized internationally as an author, speaker, and coach to founders, CEOs, and entrepreneurs. Gaia is celebrated for her deep work in personal development, wellness, and mindfulness. In this episode, we go deep exploring how we can create better lives, better businesses, and create a lasting legacy. Let's jump on in. Gaia, you're very, very welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. I want us to tell you your background and how you got to doing the work you're doing, because I find it fascinating. But maybe you'd start off in telling us what it is exactly you do.
Absolutely. So this is my own title. I don't think this is an official title that exists out there, but I would call myself a science-based spiritual life coach for entrepreneurs. So what I do is I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, founders. And I think you've been in business, right? So when you're in business, there's a part of you that is the doing part, the productivity part, the efficiency part. And then there's a part of you that's personal, what you bring to your leadership, what you bring to the culture of the business, what you bring to the imagination and creativity and the expansion of your business. And that part is really the part I work on. So my clients would normally come to me when they're in a moment of crisis or unease or conflict, high stress. Maybe, they've just experienced one of the 4 Ds of life, one of the 4 disasters of life. So death, divorce, or disease. Yeah. And maybe it's just a diagnosis. Maybe it's just something they can feel coming their way. But usually those would be 4 indicators that they're in a crunch time, like a midlife crisis or a midlife awakening, as I would call them. And so they come to me to basically get realigned with who they are, realigned with their entrepreneurial journey. Why did they become entrepreneurs to begin with? That vision that they once had to making the world a better place, making their life a better life, having more freedom and more way of impacting from a sense of self, the sense of who they are. And I help them reconnect back into that so that their productivity, their efficiency, their leadership, their culture, but also themselves, is coming from a place that's more fulfilling, more passionate, more whole. And it's not not fighting with itself, because most of us are fighting our conditioning, our circumstances, and the trauma that life has handed to us over the years. So I have my own model. It's called the Total Intelligence Model. We start by working a lot on the unconscious mind and the body. So I'm a nutritionist. I would do genetics-based nutrition. I would see the body as our main place to start the work. We have 3 chemicals in our body that are important to keep balance: our brain chemistry, our blood chemistry, and our gut chemistry. If any of those are imbalanced, then no matter how much work we do on the psychology or the spirituality, it's going to be limited, because the body is the vessel, right? The body is the tool, the vehicle by which we are here on this planet in the material sense. The rest is in the ether. So the ether can't operate if the material isn't functioning properly. So we start with the body, we then move into the unconscious mind, and then we move into all the other parts of us that we show the world.
Which I find very interesting, because I know a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm still in business. I suppose I find entrepreneurs are my tribe, because I've been in business for 40 years, and so that they certainly are my tribe. But most of them have done it the other way around, in that they paid not that much attention to their physical health, so this thought of nutrition and your gut. They haven't paid a whole lot of attention to that. they've certainly paid very little attention to the inner world of the who am I, why am I here, purpose. That's mumbo jumbo, next channel, please. And what they've paid attention to is, how can I be successful in the world? And so, because of the age I'm at, and because I've been in business for 40 years, and I know a lot of people within those. So the people I know are successful business people. They've built successful businesses. To all intents and purposes, they have what everyone else wants. They have successful businesses. They've money. They've nice cars, a home, all these sort of things. And yet, what I see is two things. One is a lack of fulfillment. Maybe three things. A lack of fulfillment I see in a huge amount of the entrepreneurs I connect with. The second thing is not a huge understanding of who am I outside of my business card that says CEO. But the other thing is that to fix that, they dig back into their business. So I need to achieve this. We need to expand to here. We need to grow here. I need to have this level of net worth. I need to have my business at this scale, this size. And so it's what seems to me, and I wonder what you think about this. It seems like they've spent their whole life building this ultimately to find fulfillment. They get to that point of success and wealth, and they haven't found fulfillment, but they keep pursuing the same thing, hoping it will get them to find fulfillment. Is that just me, or do you come across that also?
Oh, it's absolutely the way people go until something happens that shakes them in their boots, and it forces them to look at it a different way. Yeah. And sometimes it's not something that happens to them. Sometimes it's something that happens to someone else. Like a friend of theirs gets diagnosed with cancer, and in the healing part or the curing part of cancer, they get a giant aha. They change their lives. They get cured miraculously without the pharmaceuticals. And the world around them can't help but notice, and then they might be open to something, right? Like the secondary effect of that is that people start to get more open to alternatives. And I mean, look, we're going through a massive change on our planet right now. Like, I think no matter how woo-woo one is, it's hard to ignore. Financial systems are breaking down. Political systems are completely changing. We got climate change. We've got there's just so much going on. And I think if we take a step back and we just look at it from a material versus the part of being and the part of doing as two separate things, we are, for those of us in observance, right, observing what's going on, the old model of how we do just does not work anymore. And the way we've done things for 100 years is breaking down. And the last 100 years has been the century of the mind, the intellect. Like, it's not the presence anymore. It's not the being anymore. It's do, learn more, get more, have more. It's all marketing. I mean, marketing didn't exist before whatever it was, the 1920s, because it wasn't necessary, nor was industrialization, nor was this mass consumption. And it's been fine for 100 years. And now we're getting to the point where we can't live like that anymore. People are miserable. Anxiety and mental health issues are going through the roof. Suicide is going through the roof. Like, there's just so much indication that the way we've been doing things, what we call success by a commercial standpoint, just is not success inside. And the more people wake up to this message, I think COVID was actually a huge gift to that, where people were forced to slow down. Some people anyways were forced to slow down, others ramped up, but some people were forced to slow down and actually take notice that what they were working for actually does not bring joy, does not bring pleasure, does not bring fulfillment or peace or passion or curiosity or any of the stuff that the human condition is all about. We're about creativity. We're about caring. We're about collaborating. We're not about competition. We're not about doing better at the cost of someone else's demise. That's fabricated conditioning. Those are fabricated instructions of life. They're morals. They're not universal laws. Universal laws are the same for us as they would be for any living creature on the planet, which is do no harm, work together.
I'm wondering, in the times we live in, and I agree with much of what you say about certain things breaking down, but I wonder, do we now because of those things, because of the wealth our societies have gained. And I spoke to a friend about this recently. Most people now, certainly in the Western world, and I live in Ireland, live in a degree of comfort. They may be struggling, but that struggle may mean they can't afford to buy a new car, or they can't afford to move to a bigger house. It's not the struggle of 200 years ago, or maybe I'm going to say even my grandparents' time, because my father's 87, but when he talks about growing up as a child, it was a time of struggle. It was a time of, by Wednesday, they were, would they make it to Friday? Had they enough food to make it to Friday? So a lot of prosperity has grown probably in Europe and in the Western world, which means we're not worrying about pure survival, and now we can think of different things. So are you and I'm as much a navigator as anyone else, but I wonder, is that just a privilege that I have? Is it a privilege that you have? Because if your roof was falling down and if your creditors were knocking at your door, would you be back focusing, well, how can I have more, rather than how can I be more?
Well, of course, we are living in a time of luxury.
Yes.
We are your generation, my generation, we're the very first generation in human history where we don't have to worry about survival the way our grandparents or grandparents had to. It isn't about, can I make it to the end of the week? But it's become like, our lives have become more about why are we here? What is the purpose? We have that luxury of having the time to consider our existence, right? To be existential.
Is that us evolving as a species? Is that?
I don't know if it would be an evolution per se. I mean, it would definitely be an evolution from the pyramid of like Maslow's pyramid, right? Like survival needs at the bottom and transcendence at the top. So by that model, we are evolving.
Yeah.
I know that there's in NLP and neuro-linguistic programming, there is an exercise you can do with your clients to check in on their value system, and even the values, what we prioritize as important in our life, goes from the very tribal survival mechanisms of like right here, right now, what can I have, to the very spiritual element of contribution for the well-being of the whole planet. So there is an evolution of it. Now, is it an evolution day to day when we walk out on the street and, half the kids under 30 are depressed and taking drugs to get a kick out of life because they have no struggle, right? Like, I think struggle to some degree is essential to our sense of self. We find out who we are in times of woe, right? In times of push, of challenge. And maybe there aren't enough of those for the really young kids, like the Generation Alpha or Generation Z, for them to have that sense of self. But then again, maybe there are people who've struggled so much that it's become their identity. And so they're creating more struggle. They're creating more pain. They're creating more systems of pain for everybody around them unnecessarily, because it's the only model they have to operate from. So I think there's a fine balance between the two. And a concept that I like to relate to my clients is the difference between being comfortable and being familiar. So being familiar is where we get ourselves trapped. Like, it's the repeating the patterns that don't serve us. Getting comfortable is an absolute human need. Why there's no need to put ourselves in discomfort, but definitely put ourselves in the unfamiliar. But discomfort, challenges our sense of survival, our sense of safety. But unfamiliar challenges our sense of growth and newness and surprise.
When I established this podcast and called it The Inner Entrepreneur, my aim was to talk about what goes on inside. And because my experience with business people and entrepreneurs is that it's all, as you say, in the doing. And they're focused on what can I do, what can I be, what can I have, how can I grow my business. It's push. But also I say, when I get to know these people, you see the consequences of that. And the consequences of having more is not nourishing your soul. It's emptying your soul often, because the question is, well, you've gained more, but what have you lost? You've lost connection with yourself often. You've lost connection with your your partner, your spouse, your children, your friends, your health, your well-being. So the purpose of these conversations are to have entrepreneurs stop for a moment and go, well, there might be something else. And I think a word most entrepreneurs don't know is the word enough. Like when do you have enough? And I spoke to a client recently, and he absolutely has enough, but has spent same age as me, but spent a lot of his life absolutely not having enough and absolute survival. And the struggle for him is now to he recognizes he now has enough, but how does he change the feeling? How
Well, and this is a great question, right? Like, you're talking about connection, but most people are connected to their mind.
Yes.
In the mind, so the psychology, this is the ego part, right? This is who we think we are, which most of us are not operating by who we know ourselves capable of being, but rather we're operating from a sense of identity that is telling us that it's not good enough. So we're operating from who we are not, if that makes sense, right? In other words, if you was always saying, nobody's going to like you, then everything you do is from the idea that nobody's going to like you. It's not from the idea that you're just as likable as everyone else. So most of us are operating from our connection to our ego, to our identity, which is illusion. Our brain doesn't know the difference between reality and illusions. It just knows to take the instruction and follow through. So one of the things that's really important to do is to connect with our body. Our body holds all the information, it holds all the wisdom. We know, and people talk about it, like we know in our gut when we're doing something that is against sense of self, right? We also know when we're betraying ourselves because we can see a bigger potential, but we're limiting ourselves to what we think we should do or what we've been taught to do, or the moral. Now, when I talk about morals, what I'm talking about is those rules that humans have made for us to belong in the society that we're in.
Okay.
When I talk about universal laws, I'm talking about the laws of physics that apply to human behavior as well. They're universal, no matter who we are on the planet, where we come from, how much money we have. And those are two different things. Our ego is tied to our moralistic compass, which comes from our family, our society, our religions, versus universal law, which is true to everyone. And the universal law is that feeling we get in our body. And to slow down our breath, our thoughts, our feelings, and just reconnect back to our body, which works way better if our brain chemistry, blood chemistry, gut chemistry is in order, right? Allows us to get the information a lot quicker about what is the right move. And am I doing this out of a fear pattern, or am I doing this because this absolutely expands my possibility into something amazing, right? Everybody we follow online, like all the big names, they've stepped out of the norm. They knew that this was where society told them to be, and they went bigger. They ventured into the unfamiliar. And that's what we all know we're capable of doing, but we don't do it because the mind rules. And we don't listen enough to our bodies to get that sense of safety and capacity.
I agree with you totally, and listen to the body. And something I would say to myself is that my mind will lie to me. At times my mind will tell me things that aren't true. You want to do this, Paul. You need this. My mind will tell me stories that, and I know I can't always trust it. But I don't think my body ever lies to me. In that, if my body feels at peace, then I am peaceful. If my body feels anxious, then I am anxious. But my mind can lie to me. That's something I had to learn to trust many, many years ago, because about 20 years ago, I went through a time of enormous stress. But the interesting thing was that I think I was in that place for probably a couple of years, wondering, going to doctors, going, well, what's going on? My heart's always pounding. What's going on? No one telling me. And then eventually, actually on a Tony Robbins weekend and Unleash the Power Within, having my aha moment and realizing, seeing the elephant in the room, and not realizing that for a number of years in advance, my body had been going to me, Paul, would you stop doing this? This is, we hate this as your being. We are unhappy with this. And my mind was talking to doctors and other people going, I can't figure out what's wrong with me. Now, when the penny drops, when I relay that story, firstly, it sounds entirely stupid to go, sorry, Paul, you didn't realize that was going on. But honestly, I didn't. And I had a conversation with someone recently who said, well, you were having panic attacks. And I said, oh, maybe it was. And I'm going, how did I not know? And he said, because I had them also for a long time and I didn't connect either. So that's so the lesson I learned from that was always pay attention to the body. So my question after that ramble is, if someone is completely disconnected from their bodies, as a lot of people are, I believe, because I was, how is it they find, if someone is listening to this and going, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be connected to your body? How do you recognize that connection? And what can you do to reestablish that connection? I know I'm
Okay,
throwing
so
a lot of questions.
Okay, I'm gonna make it a little more fun. I'm gonna answer that in a second because I want to just make a comment first about what you said, right? And because earlier you were saying how people will know they're going up the wrong path, but they're still continuing. They know they're not fulfilled, but they don't know what else to do. So they keep doing the same that they've always done. And the mind sometimes does intervene, right? Like we're not stupid. We know when we're doing what we're not supposed to be doing, but we stay on the track. And like the hormones are very important to understand. And I'm not going to get into a big discussion about it, but you think about adrenaline and how many entrepreneurs run on adrenaline. Their body feels tired. Yeah. Their body feels tired and they put in another 2, 3, 4, 5 hours and they do this on repeat because it's the only modality they know to work from. And adrenaline, cortisol, like the cortisol is a stress hormone, right? Our body is constantly giving us indications that something is off. But again, what do? In the last 100 years, we've learned that if we have a symptom, we go to the doctor gives us a pill, and then we don't have that symptom anymore. Of course, 6 months down the line, we have side effects.
We smoke a cigarette, or we have a glass of wine, or we do it, and we call it relaxing.
Yeah, exactly. And those are all cures. Well, cures hide the symptom, but they don't heal the root cause.
They distract.
And like every symptom we have, and there's like a form that I have my clients fill out, and it's like all these symptoms that you can have. And it's incredible to see how many symptoms we have that we don't even know are symptoms of, like a lack of vitamin, a lack of sleep, lack of lifestyle, like of whatever. And which is why I like starting with the body, but not everybody wants to do the body, which is fine. Like they don't have to, but, it's why the more in balance we are with our body, the more we nurture our body, feed it good food, rest, good sleep, exercise, fun activities, the more we start to be aware of when our body does not feel good. And the more we care for the state of our physical being, the more we start to care about the state of our entire being. And I think that's really important. And it's not the same as going to the gym mindlessly because, we read a survey that says that 20 minutes, 3 times a week will stave off heart disease, right? Yes, totally. But if you're going there mindlessly, you're not actually paying attention or in awareness. And so to answer your question, how do you get into your body? It's an exercise of awareness. And that means having to willingly, intentionally stop on a regular basis. Stop stop having your phone right next to you, buzzing you all the time. Stop looking at email or Instagram or whatever it is you might be doing to numb the boredom, like numb the empty space. Empty space in our life is something we had in the 80s all the time, right? You stood at the cash register and you had to talk to someone or you had to reflect. You did not have your phone numbing your brain with noise and distractions. And one of the reasons why there's so much mental health concerns now is because there is no space anymore to just be still. And being still is so important to understanding how our body works, understanding what's going on internally, to just have that moment of awareness. And it doesn't have to be hours. It doesn't even have to be meditation, right? It just has to be 5 minutes of like conscious intention to stop, take a breath. And I like to scan the body. You start at your toes and you take the deep breaths in, deep breaths out, and you just kind of move up your body and just feel how it feels to be you.
Mhm.
And what's different today from yesterday? And the more you do that, the more when you're in a meeting with someone and they're lying to you, you'll pick it up,
Mhm.
right? When there's a negotiation that doesn't feel right, even if your brain is saying, this is an amazing opportunity, go for it. You'll know if it means,
Yes.
signing a contract with the devil, you know,
Yeah.
beyond what your mind is telling you. And I mean, I don't know if you can pick this out. I've met a couple of people who cannot hear these two voices, but in my experience, everybody has two voices, a really loud one and a really soft one. And the loud one tends to be the ego, right? That part of us that is our identity we're trying to prove to the world. It's the one that if you ask yourself a question, it's going to respond loudly, ongoing, with tons of examples from the past, tons of probabilities about the future, and it's constantly trying to convince you. And then there's that other voice. And for some people, that other voice is a whisper, or it might be like that stealing right deep in here, but it just answers the question like this. It's super quick. It's super quiet. It'll tell you the answer once. It'll never have more than 3 words as an answer. And it's the one you should have picked. And when poop hits the fan, you're like, dang it, I knew I shouldn't have said yes. Right? It's that little voice. And that little voice is the real you. And it's the one that my clients connect with more and more as they work with me. And so, by the end of the year, all of them, even though we usually don't work directly on their business, we only work on them. It's the part of them that within a year, they'll have 2x to 10x whatever success means to them.
I think almost everybody knows what you mean when you talk about that gut feeling or the intuition, and maybe they won't give it as much importance as it has. But if I'm talking to entrepreneurs in the audience, I can say I would absolute certainty that ignoring my intuition, very much, I can remember absolutely ignoring it in this particular situation. And by ignoring it, I made a €500,000 investment in a property that turned out to be one of the biggest headaches I ever had. I mean, literally, when you write a check to get out of a problem, that was one of the things when I ignore my intuition. But I also listened to my intuition when I was about to enter into a €5 million investment for a new property for my business in 2007. And literally we had almost everything signed. And I've told the story before, but as I drove home, and I live in Wicklow, and it was a beautiful summer's day, and I drove home, and I stopped as my gates slowly opened. And as I pull into the drive, so pulling slowly, my driveway winds around, so the pulling slowly, I can see out to the ocean. I can see out to the Irish Sea in Wicklow. And as I drove through, something in my head said, you have a beautiful home, you drive a nice car, but what's really important is you have a beautiful family. You have a wife you love, you have 3 great sons, and that means you have a blessed life. And then I thought, if I do this, if I spend all this money, what extra will I have? What will I have that I don't have now that's of any real value? And that, as you talk about this voice that immediately answers in 1 or 3 or less words, and the answer was I'd have nothing. When I looked at what I really had of value, which was the life I was privileged to live in, a beautiful home with my wife and children, and I said, what will I have that's of real value? The answer was nothing. And as I thought it further, I thought, might I damage that life? And I thought, I could damage that life, because I would have this extra debt, I would have this extra responsibility. And thankfully, in that moment, I just said, I have everything I need. I mean, I don't need anything more. I'm not. So I didn't do it. Now, the business people listening going, oh my God, Paul, you could have doubled your business. Yeah, I could have, all of those things.
Well, you could have, or it could have been the worst decision on earth.
As
right?
it happens, we know now historically that it would have been the worst decision, because by 2008, 2009, the world crashed. And that was a very difficult time for me anyway, because my business fell by 60%, like most people. And that was enormously difficult. But it fell by 60%, not owing the banks any money, owning the 2 business premises we ran from, as opposed to entering into it having just bought this enormous premises that what is now going to be half empty because there was no business there, and having this enormous debt. It possibly would have killed the business and may have killed me. So if anyone needs, I came away from that going, you listen to that was 20 years ago, or maybe slightly less. You listen to that voice because it always has your best interest at heart. Always.
Yeah, exactly. And the stretch, let's call it that, the stretch is in trusting it.
Yes.
Right? Because most of us hear that voice, like you said, but we don't trust it because the mind is stronger.
Yeah.
The mind is telling us, yeah, but, and what if, and the key is really just trusting it, because when you trust that voice, no matter what happens next, it's coming from a place of I can. And when you don't trust that voice, you don't know what's coming up afterwards. It could be more money, right? It could be more real estate. It could be a bigger business, but it's all the soulful parts that you mentioned, right? Like, yeah, I have a bigger business. I make more money, but have I lost time with my family?
Yeah.
Right? Have I lost a piece of myself? Have I had to get into bed with investors who I don't respect and who are nagging me at 3:00 in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, like, what I'm hearing from you is that you had clarity. And clarity, I think,
moment of clarity, yeah.
Exactly. And I think clarity is one of those things.
I was maybe, I'm going to say 24. I was literally one day away from signing the deal. I mean, I was literally on the precipice. So I left it very close to the edge, but I had in that moment absolute clarity, which in hindsight was an absolute blessing. Absolute blessing.
Yeah. But this is how like insight works. It's like you're in the shower, just minding your own business, and all of a sudden you get the big light bulb moment that answers all the questions you've been having for the last month, right? That's how it works. That's kind of the magic, and it's kind of the trust process as well. So clarity is, I don't think there's enough weight given to the importance of clarity in everyday language or everyday systems, or even like I have 3 kids as well, and they don't learn clarity in school. They get taught to follow an instruction, but it's not clarity from within. Actually, I have 2 kids who are in the traditional school model, and I have 1 kid who went to school in a self-directed model. And I can tell you from the experience of 3 that the one who went to the self-directed model, she's the one who has the most clarity of herself. And she's the one who's most unbudgeable by someone else's rhetoric. And I think that's so important to have that clarity, especially as an entrepreneur, because everybody looks to you. And most entrepreneurs don't have someone above them to go to for advice or clarity. That's where the coaching comes in. Yeah. Right? You need someone to spar with. You need someone to challenge you. Someone's going to challenge you from where you are, not where they are, which a colleague might not do, right? A colleague might be slightly in competition, or it might have their ego or their hurts or their pains come up in the conversation. A good coach won't do that, right? A coach will just listen to you and help you find your clarity from where you are, your North Star, your central piece, the thing that resonates across all your decisions, all your behavior, all your thoughts, right? Because how you do anything is how you do everything, and help you to trust it bit by bit until the trust is so big, it becomes your new modus operandi, right? So it's not, can I make another 10 million? But it's, can I have more while gaining more for myself? And that, I think at the end of the day, is the most important part of life. That's success. I mean, everybody has their own model, but until you've lost something important, you don't realize how much the personal actually matters more than the material.
I think if you get to the end of your life and you've made that extra 10 million, or you've made that extra 100 million, depending on how you lived your life, you've still a significant probability of getting to the end of your days feeling that you've wasted your life. But if you've spent your life deeply connected to the people you love and to yourself, no matter how much money you've made, you've very little probability of getting to the end of your life and feeling unfulfilled.
Yeah, it's part of that model of Maslow, right? The transcendence. Have I mattered? Have I impacted? Have I connected? Have I done what I was born to do? And nobody, like you ask a 5-year-old, no 5-year-old is like talking about, I don't know, being an auditor or
Yeah. But we need
whatever, like
auditors.
no, well, doing, I don't know, but like, I don't know, but like being, whatever, a job, right? They talk about being superheroes and being
Yes.
like
Yeah.
big rock stars, like big
Yeah.
creative people or big people who help the world. Like, this is what 5-year-olds do. And it's always super inspiring. And then we get to 18 or 19 and we get put down this track of like, this is my little box. And no matter
Yeah.
how successful that box is, it's still a box. We forget to have an impact, to contribute, to collaborate, to connect. And we have, some of us have families, and that's our little connection piece, but there's so much more. We can connect to the community. Entrepreneurship, what is entrepreneurship? It's literally the choice, like a life choice to make things or services better than they've ever been before. So entrepreneurs are like literally singularly responsible for human evolution. Scientists may discover things, but entrepreneurs make it a business and make it available to everybody. So if we didn't have entrepreneurs, we wouldn't have human evolution. So if you're doing human evolution without actually your heart being in it, then it's empty. Like, it's going to be empty. It's going to be empty for the client. It's going to be empty for you. It's at the end of the day, it's just about the money. And we look at there's so many entrepreneurs who don't think about the impact they're having, right? Like entrepreneurs who create products that actually make humans more unhealthy. And then they create a product to supplement the unhealthiness.
Yeah.
And then they make a product to make that supplement more powerful. And it's this vicious cycle. And they've created the problem that they're also solving. And what is that about? Like, most of the world right now, that's where the cycles we're in. Someone created a problem and then they created a solution. And we're just eating at this.
What I find it very interesting is that most of your work is with entrepreneurs and founders, and yet the singular, what I'm picking up is the singular you look to support someone on or deliver is the ability to connect with themselves.
So the singular most important thing to living a fulfilled and passionate life, where you take your last breath feeling really good about who you have been and what you have done, is to connect the different parts of you, your heart, which is your connection to others, your collaboration with others, your mind, which is your skill, your intelligence, the things that only you could put together because your mind has worked it out in this unique way that you've done. Your body, which is your energy, your doing, your acting. Like, how are you going to execute this into the world? And then that part of you that's just you, your spirit, your essence, that makes it yours and only yours. I think when those four are connected to one single mission, you've got alignment, and that is fulfillment. That is the true and only success. It's to go to bed at night knowing that these last 24 hours, you mattered.
Yeah. And when you talk about the importance of clarity, is that what you mean? Because when you talk to an entrepreneur about clarity, they probably want to talk about how clear they are on their business strategy. I don't think that's what you mean.
No,
it's how clear they are on these four elements.
Well, it's how clear you are on who you are.
Who you are.
Your business is a part of you.
Yeah.
Your family is another part of you. Your alone time is another part of you. Your financial plan is another part of you, right? But how clear are you on the wholeness of you, and how are all these parts working together to complete you?
So when you say how clear you are on who you are, is who you are not something independent of all these things? Is there not a who you are before you engage with your family, your business, any of these things? Isn't there a who you are that is present before all of these things?
Yes, which is what we were talking about earlier, right? It's the identity of who you are versus the identity of who you are. So versus how you're showing up, which is often the identity of who you are not, based on the life lessons and conditioning you were given.
It's the lesson. So it's how you've learned to behave.
Yes, exactly. So you might be, for instance, let's talk about like relationships or even leadership, right? Because every relationship we have with someone else is actually a reflection of our relationship with ourselves. But they always say, treat others the way you want to be treated. But people don't actually do that. They do that on the surface as a strategy. I gave you flowers because I like you to give me flowers, right? But underneath, what is that? That's a play. That's controlling. I'm going to control your behavior by doing a specific act, right? So we're so afraid that the other person isn't going to show us love that we do these strategies, these micro strategies to get them to perform like a show monkey and show us love. But then we don't believe the love because it didn't come from them. It came from our controlling ways, right? So we do this in every part of our life. We behave from a sense of fear, a sense of lack, a sense of not good enough, knowing that that's what we're doing. And then when the world responds, we don't accept it because we know we were acting from a place of lack. And it's simple, but it's not easy. And the simple thing is to start believing, start trusting, start knowing who we are, what our worth is, what we're about as a fundamental human being, and start behaving and speaking to that. So we're not employing controlling, micromanaging strategies for a response. We're just, because there's no outcome. There's no specific outcome that we're seeking, but rather a journey that we're on. It's a journey of growth versus the outcome of significance, right? You mentioned Tony Robbins earlier. I think you might know that I used to work for Tony Robbins. I think you had another guest recently who also, we worked for Tony Robbins at the same time. I'm not sure if we ever met, but Tony Robbins talks about the 6 human needs, right?
I love the 6 human needs. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's certainty, variety, significance, connection. Those are needs of the body. What does that mean? That means those are the needs that we are programmed to drive all of our actions, our thoughts, and our feelings, because not having them puts us outside of the circle of belonging and therefore puts us in danger of not having food on the table, not having friends, not knowing when the next paycheck is going to come. And most people operate from those. So we maneuver all these behaviors to get a response that gives us certainty, that gives us significance, that gives us variety, and that gives us connection. But the other 2 human needs is where we find fulfillment. It's the need for growth and contribution. And growth does not mean I have more money today or a bigger house today than I did yesterday. That's significance. Growth is I evolved and learned something new today that I didn't know yesterday. And the gift of that growth is more important to me than what I had to suffer or give up to get it. So it's really finding the pleasure in the journey of getting where we're going. And contribution is giving beyond ourselves. So someone donates $1 million to a foundation, gets their name on a plaque, or even if they don't get the name on the plaque, that's still significance. Contribution is running into a burning building because someone's going to die and you're willing to put yourself on the line for it, right? Contribution is I'm giving to you without credit. You're not even going to know, right? And it's completely silent. There's going to be no mention of it. And it's going to cost me something to give this to you, right? Like Tony talks about giving his last $10 to someone he saw.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that story.
Yeah. But then, it comes back to him. And that's what the universe does when you trust that there's a net catching you. If you're willing to just step out of what's familiar to you, it'll always come back to you. Like it'll always come back to you. Maybe not in the immediate, but it'll always come back to you. Even if the way it comes back to you is just in your sense of self and just personal happiness and fulfillment that you've done this journey, that you've taken this, that you've had this growth, or that you've given this thing away. So
I love what you said there about trust that the universe has this net that's catching you. I've known that a lot of people listen to this going, is she crazy? The universe does not have a net that's catching me. But it's certainly a lovely idea. I think at times I believe that, at times I like to believe that, and there are times I don't believe it. But
what is the universe? So this is a kind of that talk, right? What is the universe? Who is God? What is life? I mean, we can give it whatever spiritual or religious term we want. At the end of the day, it's you, right? If you trust that if you do this, things will work out.
Is that trust in your own resourcefulness? It's more than that.
Well,
It's more than
if you can have the courage to trust an outcome, or to trust the journey rather, then you also have the courage to overcome whatever comes your way.
yeah.
Like, the challenge doesn't come to you because you have the courage. The challenge comes to you, and you get to choose whether you're going to take this challenge to show yourself you have the courage. And what you show yourself is the net of the universe.
Mm.
That is the safety. So yes, it is resourcefulness, but not up here. It's like in the whole life. I trust that if something's not right, my body's going to let me know.
Mm.
I trust that if an obstacle comes up, my very intelligent brain will find a way to make a right decision. I trust that whatever happens, I'm going to learn something amazing about myself, and that's going to pay out somewhere later down the line, because, the tests of life are always happening, and they keep getting bigger until you learn the lesson.
Yes.
And then once you learn the lesson, they don't get bigger, but they get nuanced.
Mm.
And so you become an expert in overcoming that challenge, right? We need to act consistently with courage in order to learn something new. And that means stepping out of what's familiar, and sometimes it's stepping out of what's comfortable as well. So we need to act consistently with courage. When you act consistently with courage, you get confidence.
Mm.
And confidence is, oh, I've done this before, I can do this again. But when you act consistently with courage, showing your confidence, you eventually get certainty.
Yes.
And certainty is, it doesn't matter what comes at me. I know I can handle it. And a lot of people talk about seeking confidence. Actually, what they want is seeking certainty. And in the entrepreneurship world, like, the most interesting entrepreneurs to speak to are the ones who've been put through the ringer, and they've come out not only knowing how to grow a business, but knowing how to lead people, how to have that empathy, have compassion, that vulnerability, right? It's the human part that makes them fascinating. It's not how many empires they've grown, right? That's the certainty. That's the part of, like, I'm in this for the growth and the contribution. I'm not in this just to have another $1 million in the bank account or a bigger house.
It's interesting that of all the entrepreneurs I've spoken to, and also everyone who I've spoken to on this podcast, they've all learned something, and they've something to share, but they've gone through a challenge to get there. So I've heard some wonderful stories on the podcast, and I've met some amazing entrepreneurs. Not one of them have said to me, yeah, I just fell out of bed one morning and I had this massive insight, and that's why I'm so, I'm a great teacher. Not one of them have said, yeah, I just stumbled into this business and that's how I'm so successful. I haven't met that person yet. They may well be out there. They will all tell me of the journey, and the journey. I know people talk about the hero's journey, but it's what I see everywhere. People always tell the journey of, well, I set out with this plan, this idea, and this was the obstacle. And it was interesting. I think you called them the 4 Ds at the very beginning of the conversation, but it's interesting to me that almost everyone had to reach that point of some degree of desperation in their life and move on through it for the growth, to get to a point where they have a story to tell, or where they have a degree of success in their life. Almost everyone has to do that. Is that just the way of life? I'm presuming you have the same experience with all the people you speak to.
Well, so I have, it's really funny, when you do marketing and branding, they say, who's your avatar and everything, right? So I've done my branding and my marketing a little differently. And as I was telling you before we started recording, I'm actually in the process of rebranding. And for me, the demographics aren't as important as the psychographics. So demographics is age and how much money do you make and where do you live and that kind of stuff. And psychographics is what's the emotional state you're in.
Yeah.
I have two very clear camps of clients. I've got the entrepreneur who's over 45 years old, and he has a family, and he's done several businesses, a lot of them traditional businesses, like brick and mortar businesses. And they're at 50 and they're like, is this really it? Surely there's more to life. I've done everything. I know how to do everything. The challenge is gone. I feel empty. Now what? And then I've got the under 30, and they're e-commerce, crypto, mega successful financially entrepreneurs. And the psychology between both is really fascinating because the 50-year-old has gone through life challenges. They've overcome. And usually when we're working together, it's more stopping that train that knows it's heading for, heading into a curve at high speed and can't slow down, right? It's more looking at the patterns and the belief systems, the thoughts that have led them to this burnout. But there's an awareness of burnout. The 30-year-olds, it's more, how can I be a higher performer, a better performer? How can I get more from my employees? Not necessarily through empathy or compassion, but through strategic communication. Or
so does that mean they're in the head more?
Yeah, it's more the having. And if we look at like the, let's call them the gurus out there that we might follow on LinkedIn or Instagram, Gary Vaynerchuk is, I think, a wonderful example. Like 10 years ago, he was talking about like hustle. And then it cost him, if I remember correctly, his family, a divorce, wealth, like all this stuff. He stopped, and now he's talking about purpose and meaning and slowing down and meditating. We have loads of these guys who were hustling and preaching the value of hustling. And then boom, that train hits the curve. And now they've found their way back to being and slowing down and taking time. Success isn't worth it if you don't have family, right? But there's a new up and coming generation like Alex Hormozi, who's all about making your $1 billion business, and I'll help you and I'll do it with you. And again, my two camps of clients, it's fascinating to see who they follow, because the 30-year-olds are in the hustle and the 50-year-olds are in the, I've had the pain, now I'm slowing down. And so I think it comes for everybody. Life, nobody gets out of life unscathed by life, right? Now, how long does it take you to get there? Or how willing are you to prepare for it? Because you're watching everybody else go through it too. And again, no one's above the laws of physics. That's an individual thing. I try to prep my under 30s for life. In other words, I help them get what they want, but I help them get it with the awareness that presence, slowing down, connection, empathy actually matter, because it'll save them down the road when, life hits them and they need to resort to their human elements, not just their productivity elements. And with my older clients, it's about finding more that undercurrent of who they are, that message that they forgot about, being themselves versus doing what they've learned.
I can't remember how long ago it was, but at some stage I recorded an episode of the podcast, a solo episode called "Why Alex Hormozi Might Be Dead Wrong," and I have a lot of respect for Hormozi. I think I have 2 of his books on the shelf here, and I think he's a very, very switched on guy. But he's almost like the David Goggins of the business world. It's like go, go. And so he's phenomenally successful. And when I listen to his business, he knows what he's talking about. I just wonder if he may in 10 or 15 years time go, there was more to life. And I also had a conversation maybe half a dozen episodes ago with a guy who had lost a £25 million business. And he'd become a multimillionaire in his late 20s. End of the day, the long story, which if anyone's interested, can scroll back about 10 episodes and hear the story. But he lost his £25 million business, and he's rebuilt himself and done a huge amount of personal work. But I asked him a question, because he's now 45 and I'm almost 60. And he lost the business in maybe about late 20s, 30 years of age. And I said to him something to the effect of, if you had that business now at 45, do you think you would have lost it? And he goes, no way. Absolutely no way. So the behavior he was engaged in at that age, in his 20s, 30s, enabled him to build this. I mean, a £25 million business at 30 years of age is a phenomenal, amazing achievement. I didn't have that. But also he lacked the maturity and the experience to keep that business, which is what he has now. And that is the danger of the hustle mindset. Because as I always say to people, making money and keeping money are 2 different things.
Yeah, but it sounds like this person you interviewed also had the personal discipline to, on some level, not take the 25 euros as a permanent or 25 million
He's
euros
grown
as a
enormously.
permanent defeat,
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is always the fear. Some people get attached. Think the business is who they are.
Mm.
And that's one of the things that I mean, when I'm working with someone younger, I really focus on making sure they're not their business.
Mm.
Because not people talk about control and controlling this and controlling that. We can only control what we're responsible for. We can't control everything else. COVID happened. We were not in control of that. Can we control the decisions we make despite COVID? Yes. But we still can't control the outcome because all elements of the outcome are not solely up to us. But if someone is attached to their business as a form of their identity or their self-worth, the business disappears, what happens to them? And we always need that sense of self to hold us together. And that's part of the clarity. Who am I? What am I here to do? Maybe this is the model that's going to get me there. Maybe this model has to fail for this model to get me there. We don't know. It's a game of trust. And it's a game of trusting the big picture that no matter what happens, we always have what it takes to get us there. Call it God, call it universe, call it, personal resourcefulness. It doesn't matter what we call it. It just matters that we trust it.
Beautiful. Before we wrap up, because I'm conscious of your time, I want you to talk a little bit, if you have time, about legacy, because I know that's something you speak about, and it seems like a wonderful concept. Can you talk a little bit about what legacy means to you in your work?
Absolutely. So thanks for asking. So we're all creating a legacy. So what I mean by the definition of legacy is the impact that we have. So when you enter a room, you spend an hour in that room, you leave that room. Okay. The impact you had in that room is part of that legacy you left behind.
So it's not right? The legacy at the end of my life. I love that distinction.
Yeah. So it's the effect of you here and now.
Wow. Yeah.
Or what stays beyond you, right? Whether it's the room or whether it's this body, it's the legacy. We are all leaving a legacy, whether it's something we created 5 minutes ago or something we're creating over 100 years. The question is, are you creating your legacy by default or by design? And most of us are by default, right? Most of us are doing it by default. Something happens to it, we react or respond to it. It's not done by design. This is what this is the impact I want to have. And so bringing everything we talked about back into the fold here, it's having that clarity, having that connection to our purpose, having that understanding of what success means to us, not just in pockets, but in our whole lives. It's having enough energy to last us the activity we're here to do, which is the body, like the physical health. It's having the clarity of mind. It's having the lightness of spirit. And all of this is important so that our legacy is a legacy that we can be proud of in those final moments. It's a legacy that when we're however age we are and no longer so mobile or so active or so productive, we can look back and really be proud of ourselves for how we spent our life. It's the legacy that our children and our grandchildren will inevitably inherit because who we've been infects who they are, right? We're not silos. We are sponges and we're constantly exchanging with the world outside of us. So is that exchange positive or is it negative? The legacy is basically the record of that.
The distinction I love there, because I think it's really, really powerful. And I hadn't thought of it before. I do think of this idea of legacy. I think many years ago when I was studying with Keith Cunningham, and he said that, what terrified him was the notion that on the day he died, he would meet the man he could have been. And so he lived his life that when he met that man, he would shake his hand and know him as himself. And that struck me. And so that's when I think of legacy, that's kind of where I think. And I love this idea of that there's, we leave a legacy from this conversation for this hour we spent together. we leave legacy of how we've engaged with each other. We leave a legacy for anyone who might listen to this. And I like the idea that everything I do every day is leaving some degree of legacy, and it's impacting. This idea of a sponge is not just us, we're impacting on other people as well. And I suppose, as opposed to just thinking, what will my life be like when I'm on my deathbed at hopefully 90 years of age, it's what's the tiny little bits of legacy I'm leaving all the way up, and then that compounds into a life well lived.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've all had those examples where we meet somebody random, and then 6 months down the line, they reach back out to us, and that random moment completely changed something for them.
Yeah.
And they're so thankful. And to us, it meant nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or it was minimal. That's a momentary legacy. And we all have the capacity to change someone's life. I mean, Robin Williams used to say that sometimes a smile is all it took to make someone have a good day. Right. There's a concept that I like thinking about sometimes, and that's how blessed we are. Like how every connection, like you and me meeting, having this conversation, it's a blessed moment.
Yeah.
And because, I mean, this is going to sound a little bit weird, but if you'll allow it, I suppose you can cut this out if it doesn't fit that model.
If it's weird, I'm leaving it in.
But I mean, think about how many sperm had to fight to enter the ovum that became you. And then the same mathematical equation for me.
Mm.
And then you said you're almost 60. You look great, by the way.
Thank you.
I just turned 50.
You look great, by the way.
How many micro decisions did we make throughout your life? No, thank you. Your 60 years and my 50 years for us to meet this moment in time and have this conversation for your audience and my audience to get inspired by. I mean, the magic in that, the near impossibility of that algorithm to work out in this way is so fascinating. And if I didn't have an eye on my legacy, the momentary one, but the big one, this would just disappear as a conversation, that whatever. But to me, this is like a sacred moment. It's a sacred conversation. Mm. And the fact that it's sacred makes the energy of this that much more special. And so maybe we never talk to each other again. Maybe we'll go and have coffee or lunch or something one day soon. I prefer the latter.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
you never know is the point.
Right. The alchemy has already happened. And now all we have to do is sit back and let the quantum energy field do what it does and have this expand out into something absolutely incredible.
It's a wonderful
whether we know about it or not.
It's a beautiful, beautiful way to describe it. Guys, as we draw this conversation to an end, I want to thank you because I really enjoyed it. And if I never release these episodes, I will, I promise you. But if I never did, I learned so much from these. It's wonderful. And I really love that as you wrap the whole thing up and you spoke about legacy, I really love that. Can you do two things for me, please? Can you tell me a little bit about how you work with people so that they can be more intentional about their legacy? And can you give us an overview of the type of work you do and specifically how people can work with you and how they can get in touch with you?
Absolutely, sure. Okay, so we touched a little bit on the different elements that I would work on with people, but I don't have a cookie cutter model. Let's say I have a method. I call it the total intelligence method, and it's extremely personalized to the person I'm talking to. So it is me, and so therefore I have very few clients, but very highly personalized to each client. The total intelligence method has 7 parts. The first part is understanding the unconscious mind, which is all of that trauma, the fear, the belief systems, the limiting belief systems that life has given us. Because by understanding those, we get to, in the moments of decision, do one of two things. Repeat the pattern, which often is, we think we're doing something new, but it's actually just a nuance of the old, or exercise free will. And free will is where the 6 parts of the total intelligence come in, which is understanding how you think so you can think more effectively, understanding how you feel, understanding how you show up, understanding how you do, which is the body, understanding how you adapt and remain flexible so your behavior is always in a growth pattern, and understanding how you express, which is where the legacy comes from. So it's mind, heart, spirit, body, behavior, and communication expression. The expression is the legacy because you cannot express you if any of those 6 parts are out of whack.
Okay.
So if any part of you is working from fear, from a learned behavior, from a trauma, from whatever, it's you're working from those 4 human needs of the body and not the 2 human needs of the soul. And the soul human needs, so growth and contribution, that's really where fulfillment is. That's where our ultimate clarity is. If you look at every genius in history, Mozart, Beethoven, Da Vinci, they worked from the journey and the contribution to mankind, not from the fear of being poor or, rejected by the church or whatever, right? So this is where we get to. It's that expression to communicate in alignment who you are and what you're here to do. Because anybody who works with you or for you has chosen your legacy to be a part of their legacy. So it's the greatest honor we can give the world around us. So that's the model. It's called total intelligence. And when you work with me, the goal is bliss, right? So bliss is the success, the fulfillment, the clarity, the passion. And when you put it all together, you get a titan. So you become a titan, total intelligence to achieve nirvana, which is Buddhist for bliss. So that's the model. That's how I work. That's what we do together.
Sounds wonderful.
And I mean, it's coaching. At the end of the day, it's coaching. I have a couple of different models. The standard model is the one where we meet every week. And what's different about how I work is because it's so personalized, you get that hour every week with me, but I am your committed partner in success for the entirety of our time together. So WhatsApps are available, email is available. Between our coaching calls, I'm completely dedicated to you. And you have access to all my services, my resources, everything. We have a drive that's just between you and I. It's extremely made just for you.
Okay.
My goal is to just make you the most effective, most impactful, and most aligned entrepreneur on the planet, or at least in your circle. And the other model is the same thing, but it's much more experiential. We meet 1 weekend every quarter. We go deep. We do a lot of deep work because we didn't talk about this, but apart from being the nutritionist and having an undergrad in psychology and working all the psychology things through NLP and hypnotherapy, I'm also a certified shaman and do a lot of ancestral medicine work, which is really energy work, like Reiki and those elements. So that works a lot more powerfully in person. And it's a weekend that's designed just for you. There's 4 of them. So there's 4 paths you go through. And again, in between the weekends, we have coaching on demand and check-ins, and everything is highly personalized just for you. So no one else is doing the same thing you're doing. So those are the 2 ways that I work with my clients. How you reach me. So I'm in the middle of rebranding, so you can go to GaiaFerreira.com. There is a page there, but it will be changing very soon. You can look me up on Instagram, so Instagram is Gaia Ferreira Titans, and LinkedIn is Gaia Ferreira. And, or you could just drop me an email, Gaia@GaiaFerreira.com. And obviously GaiaFerreira.com.
Guy, it's been an absolute privilege to talk to you. I reached out to you, as I mentioned, because I heard you on a couple of other podcasts, and I just really connected with the depth of your understanding and the depth of the work you do. And I wasn't aware of exactly how you work, and I can see how it would be really powerful for someone to work with you, because in a lot of cases, people sign up to a coach or a program, and it is the model. I have a model, and I'll take you through my model because my model works. It sounds to me like someone turns up to you and they're getting your presence, your wisdom, your experience, and the model is them. It's whatever work, it's whatever they need to take them along the road. And it sounds quite unique.
Well,
and I really love that idea.
If I can just say something, like a lot of coaches, what they do is they make it about them. So it's their model, it's their success, it's their reviews. And there's some clients might get great outcomes from that, but it's temporary.
Yeah.
My goal is not temporary. So my clients on average work with me somewhere between 3 and 7 years. So, I don't do a lot of marketing. Like I'm doing marketing now, but I don't do a lot of marketing because my clients come to me through word of mouth. So to me, that's the best compliment there is, right?
Yeah.
Like my goal is not me in this. My goal is you. Like I'm a coach. I love human behavior. I'm fascinated by biohacking and everything in the quantum energy field, however you want to call it. I just think it's magical because so many weird and unique things have happened to me in my life that cannot be explained through the analytical mind. But I just
Likewise.
find it
Yeah,
fascinating,
yeah.
right? We've all had these
Yeah.
moments. My goal is to make you the entrepreneur who hires 20, 30 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, who is creating the systems to improve products and services, who has the impact and the influence on the world markets, the world, humanity, to be better equipped to create more peace and love on this planet, not more pain, more having, more competition, because we've had enough of that. The last 100 years have not worked so good for the planet. It's time to change. So that's, in a nutshell, that's me.
Wow. Well, that's a whole lot. Gaia, it's been an absolute pleasure, and you've shared so much with my audience. I am truly grateful. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Paul. It was such a pleasure to be on your show.
It's been my pleasure.